I appreciate all of you being here. My name is Jason Trent. I'm the product lead for process discovery at Automation Anywhere. And I'm joined by customer and partner Michael Duke from Guidehouse. Michael's going to spend most of the time today talking through the way that they've worked with customers as themselves, as well as with their customers to go to implement process discovery. But before we did that, just a quick show of hands. Who in the audience is a current process discovery customer? Couple, so that's fantastic. A lot of opportunity for you guys to learn a lot of great new things today. And, oh, I went too fast. Safe harbor slide. I don't think actually anything we're going to talk about today is forward-looking because we're talking about the product as it exists today. But if I happen to mention anything for product-related that's forward-looking, make sure you buy based upon what we have in the product today. And then hopefully all of you have seen this slide in every single presentation that you've been to so far. What I'll point out is if you think about the total automation success platform, I think process discovery really is the entryway into that for a lot of customers. It's the way that you can go and discover processes that exist within your organization. A lot of customers will decide to go and take that and then do process improvement, process documentation, or with the new capabilities we announced this week with Autopilot, they now have the ability to go and generate automations on top of those discovered processes. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about all the capabilities that process discovery will provide for you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael and let you get started.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
A couple things before we get started. My speaking style. One, I'm incredibly lazy. I'll start mumbling here before too long, so hopefully the microphone projects. If it doesn't, raise your hand and I'll try to perk up a little bit. Two, I guess either Southern or Redneck is my primary language. English is my second, so I may say a few things that you go, what the heck did he just say? So that's two. And then three, I do walk around a lot, and I don't really pay attention to the slides. So they're there for your consumption, maybe a few talking points for me, but if I get off track, it's not a big deal. I'll still try to convey the general stuff. But what I would like what that means for you guys is don't save your questions to the end. If you got a question, raise your hand or let me know, because I'd rather just be kind of a conversation than a boring talk by Mike Duke, who you don't know. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about delivering ROI across the enterprise with software and those things around task mining, process discovery, the product and artist formerly known as Fortress IQ from Automation Anywhere. Before I get into it too far, we love this stuff. The people I hire, Bob being one of those right there in the middle, trying to hide in the masses, is I look for people that can walk into any environment and say, you know what, there's 3 things, 5 things, 2 things wrong with this process. It doesn't matter what it is. You can walk into a McDonald's and find stuff, a library and find stuff. That's the people we hire. Traditionally, we would go about our business by shadowing a staff member, sitting with them and observing them for an hour, trying to take as many notes as we could. But if you've ever tried to describe your job in an hour for what you do day after day after day, you're going to miss a few things. From an automation landscape, that's incredibly detrimental. Because when I go away, I try to document it, bring it back a few times. I'll build then a process around what I got from you in an hour. Invariably, it's got issues, it's got failures, it's got points that we didn't talk about. The task mining solution, however, gets everything. And I will tell you everything, almost too much of everything. It gets every click, every down arrow, every little minutia that a person does on a computer throughout the course of their daily job. We measure that over a long period of time, and it's a lot of stuff. So it has dramatically changed how my team and Guidehouse now identifies processes for improvement, not just with automation, but around optimization. We do a lot of management consulting things too that are not automation related, but we layer over top of that our subject matter expertise, and we come up with things. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit about what task mining is. Won't spend a lot of time on that because I want to get to the real world examples, so hopefully you guys can ask me some questions around that. Yeah, that's the best picture I've taken in a long time. It's also highly doctored and very dated, although you can't tell with my haircut. So again, the agenda is pretty simple. I'm going to talk to you about process discovery and the tools we use from Automation Anywhere because they are absolutely fantastic. They don't pay me to say that, although they should. because I tell everybody in the healthcare industry that I run up against it, it's amazing. And then we're going to walk through one of my clients where we used the task mining to solve several problems. I'm going to show you a couple, talk about the ROI, talk about the process we went through to discover that and what we did to fix it, and then explain a little bit about some of the other things on their roadmap that we're working with them on. 10 seconds about Guidehouse. You can look this up on the internet. We do a lot of stuff. That's some more of my southern twang there, but we do a lot of things, particularly in healthcare, the sector that I'm in. It's all commercial. We have a federal practice that does a lot with the DoD, a lot with the VA in that space. But essentially what we do is financial optimization, at least the group I'm in. And so we'll look for areas where in healthcare we want to improve net revenue, primarily because most hospitals or provider organizations that I work with aren't making super huge profits. I think one of the presentations I was in the other day, I think it was the oil and gas one. A lot of money there. I might switch industries. But we help them improve the bottom line and try to stay solvent and viable in the market. So today, what are we going to do? These are the objectives. I had to put something on paper. I don't know if we'll actually accomplish all of these things, but a little bit of insights into the tech. So I'm going to talk to you about how we use the process discovery tool and how that works. How do you create strategies off of that tremendous amount of data that you're able to glean from those, particularly as it relates to process optimization, not necessarily just automation. But the way we look at it is they're all coupled together. It's process and tech enablement and all those things. So we'll talk a little bit about process optimization and some automation capabilities that come with that. As I talked about, we're going to look through some real world examples. We'll walk through that. Hopefully that'll generate some interest in some questions. And then discuss really how we go about building a roadmap or the deployment methodology in which to accomplish a lot of those things. So that sounds like fair objectives. Thank you. Hey, I'll tell everybody that works for me, Bob hears it all the time. A question is usually looking for a response, so I appreciate those of you that played along. All right. So very simply, what is process discovery? What is task mining in that space? There are, like with any other software, there are competitors to Automation Anywhere and their process discovery tool. I will tell you in healthcare, particularly in the environment, let me ask that question. How many in here are in healthcare? I'll try not to focus on that, but honestly, it's all I've done for 32 years, so I don't know how to talk about anything else. But the ability to take audit logs and import them into a tool are what most of the other solutions do. And that's fine if you have a very simple process like accounts payable or something that's really small and defined. When you're trying to span something like the revenue cycle of a $5 billion healthcare system where there's 5,000 employees across that spectrum, and I'm trying to get the whole ecosystem of that defined, the process mining from a log standpoint doesn't work. But a task mining does, and why it works real well is one, it records, as I mentioned, every interaction people have with their daily tools, but allows us to identify the high ROI options for optimization. There's things where we discover, it happens once a week and it may be worth $10. And sure, it's a great candidate for automation, other than it would cost 10 times as much to automate that as it would to have somebody do it. So it's not a good candidate, but we look for the high ROI, multiple million-dollar opportunities, and task mining allows us to do that in a very functional and effective way. And I'll walk through some of that. So identifying the high use cases with a large ROI, but the other thing that they do that's fundamental to what we just talked about is they also allow us to identify the cases that aren't a very good candidate. Even though people would like to see them to do that work, they're not great candidates for automation or optimization. And so it allows us to use data to explain that to our clients, our customers, in a very meaningful way. And it helps a lot with building the roadmap, prioritizing where they want to make investments, and doing those things. So it's powerful for that. If you're on the side of the organization, you're doing it internally, it's very good at building your business case that you may have to present to somebody for funding and be able to show very clearly why this is a great candidate, why this isn't, and why this is valuable for the organization. The other part is it does define, or makes it easy to define, the automation components of process optimization. And so we're going to look at a couple things where we actually fix some of their core tech from an automation standpoint before we overlay it with RPA or conversational AI or those things. So understanding the minutia in order to build up to a process where okay, these 10 things I can automate, these 5 things I can't, but here's how I need to build that in conjunction so that the entire process, the throughput of activity is much better. That's another benefit of the tool. The other thing is that we really like is it does help you build that process documentation. So a native output of the tool is that it gives you workflows, PDDs or process diagrams that you can port right over and start kind of building or optimizing the tech to do those things. And then the nice thing for us is because I've got a lot of people that say, well, you promised me $20 million, where are we? Or how is it going to stick? Or a year later, is it still working? It does allow us to provide a baseline. And that's crucial because I can say I'm going to get 20 million, but then how am I going to measure that? It's not a black box. Everybody can see where that money is going to come from, where that process optimization is going to come from, and we can measure that month over month to make sure that we're achieving that. If we're not achieving it, we also can understand why and where we need to tweak things. So those are some of the characteristics that are really important from a task mining review for us, and I wanted to share those with you. Yeah. It doesn't gather the specific process metrics from, there's 2 things. I'm glad you asked that because I had a little tickler to remember to talk about it. There's metrics that the tool measures, time-based. It took 10 clicks, 52 seconds on average per person. I got 50 people doing it. You can do the math and figure that out. But where if you're on the analyst side, those things are great measurements. If you're on the business side, not really. I want to know what are the business benefits other than shrinking time and space? Because automation, tech optimization, process optimization, quite honestly, in my world is 100% about throughput. And so that's shrinking the time things happen, increasing the efficiency, all kinds of great consulting words. But what's the business benefit? And that's where I layer in things, for those of you that are in healthcare, can I reduce the denial pool? So if I have, in this client, well, I'll show you the example, but I'll jump ahead a little bit. They had a $50 million eligibility problem where patients were coming in saying, I have this insurance. Turns out they had another insurance. That's $50 million that gets hung up, not being able to be processed. $50 million. That's a lot. I don't know about, I've got a word for that, but I can't say it because it's got a couple bad words in it. But anyways, so the business benefit is a $50 million. The analyst benefit is 2,000 hours. And I like to think about the throughput component is incremental. The business benefit is typically exponential. And so you need to combine those 2 things. But thank you for asking that question. So a couple of things that are native in the tool that are really helpful is they do document, because all these clicks that I was talking about or all these interactions that somebody's using turn into steps in a process. And it can intelligently start saying, hey, we did this 400 times, 200 times it was this pathway, 100 times it was this pathway, and then we had some variants out there that were much smaller. And it can show you where people are spending the majority of their time. If you have the subject matter expertise of that part of the business, you can also see where they're wasting their time. Because just natively, some of that looking at the clicks, the screens, and those things, you might discern that the 200, which is the greatest volume pathway, that's what we can automate. Except that process may be crap. You might look at it and say, let's take those 200 and automate them. What if you shouldn't automate those to begin with? What if the process should only be 2 steps and it's 800 steps? So there's things like that you want to make sure you apply to it. The tool allows you to do that because it actually shows every step, every endpoint on how you go about that. One of the things that we do, it's twofold. Again, I'm going to ahead myself a little bit, but that's all right. I already warned you I don't follow slides too well. We take a look at what I call broad swath process mining, and we'll take from the time a job, an indicator of a job logs in. So I'm Mike Duke. I know my login ID, and I'm a biller. I got to get bills out the door. That's what I do all day. We will follow that person from the time they log in to the time they log out at the end of the day, and we'll take all the things they've got and jam them all together. That's the macro process that we look at. While we go through that, we'll see things that we have questions about. Then we'll go back to screen signatures, which are very specific screens, and we want an endpoint for those. We'll then dig in and micro that process down to where we see either failure points or opportunities for automation, opportunities for optimization, and we just want to understand why. I'll give you an example. Healthcare follow-up, I have to go call insurance companies or go to a portal or somehow investigate a claim that's not paid. We were doing a macro follow-up process, and we noticed that several hundred times in the 10-day study that somebody was using Snippet. Why in the world you would use Snippet multiple times in a day when you have all this stuff in Epic and it's you got work queues and all this thing? What we found out is on Monday, the manager would come in, take a screenshot of the accounts she wanted her people to work, and then would email those. In the macro, we wouldn't have seen that. But we did see some things that when Snippet and that popped up, we're like, well, that's weird. And so we dug in a little bit deeper and found out that their work queue scoring and their work queue optimization had not been performed, and there was an opportunity to do that. So that's what the process variance and the error paths allow you to do. And an approach for us is kind of that twofold. Some other native things that are in the technology is they do help us identify automation. This is the metrics that I was talking about. You've got time-based, you've got volume-based. A lot of those things on the throughput that I mentioned. The software is fantastic at giving you those metrics, and you can say, gosh, this was done over 10 days by 3 people. It took an average of 2 minutes. If I extrapolate that over a year across the whole group of 30 people, that's a lot of time spent doing that. And those are things that we want to try to optimize or automate. So it's very good at giving us that breakdown in a variety of ways. The dashboards are inherent in the product. I'd like to see a few of them optimized, changed a little bit. Got to talk with the guys, but there's some things there. But you can also connect with Power BI and other tools if you'd like to do further analysis. And then, like I mentioned, it does spit out all those things that are, at least from a process consultant, are really important to us, is all the documentation that supports, hey, these are the 3 paths I want to automate. Can you dump those to supporting documentation so that I can begin coding and do those things that are important from an optimization or automation standpoint? Any question on the tool and how it's used or anything on that before I move on? Go ahead. Yes.
And when you put the recorder on their machine to record their day, how are you handling like privacy concerns from like works councils?
Yeah, so particularly in healthcare, we got PHI. If that gets out, it's a huge fine. So we've got to protect a lot of that. So you can block certain sites. If they go to Amazon on their lunch and you don't want to see that, you can block that stuff. You can also redact the critical data fields if you want to. We try very hard not to do those things because it's all in a HIPAA secure environment. Their whole security protocols are state of the art, but we need that. Once you start going back in and trying to sample and understand it, if you're missing some of that, then you worry. Passwords and things like that, though, are never captured. So I don't know your credentials or any of those things from a security standpoint. It's
less about PII and more about, like, German Works Council prevents us from watching employees and what they do. So I don't know how, like, can they turn on the recorder when they're doing a process and turn it off?
Yes, they do have, you can set it, that's the stuff that Bob handles for me, but you can set it so they can turn it off. And that's one of the notes we have on one of the examples I'm going to go through is one of the users turned it off when they started their day and then turned it on back at the end of the day, like we weren't going to notice. So you do get a flag when they disable those, but they have the ability, if you want to set that to where they can toggle it on and off as they go.
Maybe to that, just as a follow-up to that, you can also go and decide what it wants to record. So for instance, and I'm sure many of you look at occasionally CNN or Activist or Facebook or something else while you're on the job, right? We can also go and not record those screens as well and say, I want to whitelist the number of screens I want to record. Maybe I only want to record SAP, Excel, Workday, things like that. And so it's only recording those screenshots and the rest are ignored.
Got another one?
And let me ask you, German workers' councils, that's just problematic for everybody. That's been a challenge, sometimes in France, but it's slowly changing. Like there's a lot of red tape we have to get through. But we also, for European customers, right now, the data centers in London, which has been good enough from a GDPR perspective. We also have data center in Australia and in the US, so we try to keep it as local as we can, where we can. But Germany is just, I was just saying Germany's been problematic, and we're working our way through it. All right, Germany's been challenging for everybody that does what we do, right? And it's just a matter of, it's not a market that's been accepting as well. Actually, the whole DACH countries, even Switzerland has been problematic at times. But it's slowly turning. We've had conversations, but it's a long, arduous process to get to get approvals. But it is slowly changing. But we're happy to chat with you.
And it's really not just overseas either. If there's a couple clients we have in a union environment. The union pushed back and said, no, we don't want you recording our people. Mostly because they're afraid we'd start counting all the ticks on their productivity. But so we got stopped in that instance as well. But.
Yeah, this is a question about the tool. I know this is a for you integration into Automation Anywhere.
Right.
So the process analyzer that I've used before, that was tightly coupled, that's within Automation Anywhere. So is this the same way that it launches from the control room and it's handled in there? Or is it a separate module?
It's currently separate. We are bringing the product more natively into control room. So with a refresh, we actually just brought in all the Automation Anywhere branding, and so we've renamed it Process Discovery. And in the future, we'll be bringing it into the control room and kind of building a tighter coupling across both products.
Got it. So at that point, we'd be able to connect the process and the bot that came out of the process?
A lot of that will come through that autopilot capability that we announced on the keynote yesterday, where we actually take the PDD into COE Manager, and then from COE Manager allow us to go and generate a bot. All of our management and recording around the execution of that bot will be surfaced up in COE Manager, ACC, and other places like that.
Got it. So that ties everything together.
Exactly.
Thank
yes,
you.
Sir. Yeah, great question.
Was there one more in the back? Well, there's a couple here. Go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry if I jumped the line. I have a question about how if you put the recording on the employee's device for the full day, how do you differentiate when they start and stop particular processes?
For the most part, if they're, unless they're shared, we've had a few, right, Bob, that are shared devices. But for the most part, when they're at the end of their shift, we'll know what those are. So we may not get the last little bit they do, but we can set it by the time scale.
I mean, like they're probably not doing one singular process time after time the whole day. So how do you know when they're doing one thing versus another task that's on their responsibility
it's
plate?
pretty neat. I don't have any connectivity to our sandbox right now, but you can actually see some of that because it starts tracking. The tool is really smart, and it starts tracking like activity basically. And so if you're going into the the follow-up work list for Epic again in this example. We start tracking that by the screen capture, or the screen signatures is how we kind of package them up. And it knows every time that screen signature's hit, we want to grab that from a start point. And that's a follow-up process. So we kind of define it that way when we're building the mining runs.
Yeah.
Any more before we move on? Or
We got one over here.
Yeah, we got some.
I know we touched on the regulatory and the union here, but when you're approaching this with a team, what kind of conversations do you have about the focus on process optimization versus individual performance management?
Yeah, so you don't monitor everybody. That's the one thing, because if you would, AA will break the bank on selling you licenses, right, Chris? We do about 10% of a team. So it's not everybody, it's not forever, and the question we get a lot, every client, is what do I tell my staff this is going to do? Because they're going to be worried that they're going to mess up or they're going to get their wrist slapped or something. And we really do tell them. We do that same thing. When we do a process observation historically, before we got the tool, we would sit at a desk. The person would have the same concerns. We're just here to make your life easier. We want you to operate at a higher level. We're going to take a lot of the mundane things out of your life, the things that cause you a lot of pain and angst. We're going to remove those. In order to do that, we need to do this digital consulting. That's actually how we'll present it. This is a digital consulting observation, not we're going to record everything on your screen observation. And it still causes some angst, but we generally get around it.
I just have a quick question. So I work in the financial industry and we work with a lot of PII data. Is the data that's captured stored in the cloud, on a premise? Do you have a choice?
It's stored on the Automation Anywhere servers. Where that actually resides, I have no idea.
For customers that have data privacy issues, we actually have a capability that we call the Privacy Enhanced Gateway. So it's actually a service that you deploy and manage within your infrastructure. All the screenshots are sent there and then redacted. The only thing that we store within the Process Discovery Cloud are going to be those redacted screenshots. Everything that's unredacted, the original screenshots, are stored within your environment and you can purge whenever you want to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question.
The other nice thing that's about that, given all the stuff we've gone through in the last, couple of years, where everybody's now remote or a lot remote, it's fantastic for studying remote employees and what they do and how they do it. So a little bit on that for this client. So this was a West Coast health system, medium-sized health system, I'll say. And again, we went after about 10% of very specific job functions. They wanted us to study very specific things. And so the process of how do we communicate that? How do we start talking about this so that we can get it deployed? The first thing we do is introduce the concept, because this is still pretty new to a lot of people, particularly healthcare is 20 years behind at a minimum of every other industry on the planet, including goat farming, I believe. But so we have to educate them on what this is and what it does and why we do it. So that's the first step. Then we talk to them, hey, we only want 10% of a specific functional area, a specific job function. Okay, you got 10 people here. Okay, that means one's not enough, let's do 2. But we work through that and we select the users. I mean, we try to, most of the time a manager knows who's my best people, who's my not so best people. And we want a mix of those because we really do want to optimize the process. So we don't want just everybody that does what they think is a great job. We also want a few of those that might not be doing such a great job. So we select the users, we deploy that to their machines. We work with the local IT group. They just push it out to desktops, virtual or otherwise. That really takes, I want to say it takes about 15 minutes, but it's basically pushed out. Next time the person logs in, it's active, and they go. So it's a really easy lift from an IT management perspective. We like to run about 10 days, 2 working weeks, 2 weeks, 10 working days. That usually gives us enough. We could probably get by with 5, but I'm old school and I'd like to have more than more is always better than less in my world. So we try to get 10 days if we can. That kind of covers us if somebody's off for a day or 2, they call in sick, something happens. We still get enough data from the collective group. And then the uninstall is just as quick as the push out. So again, it's pretty light, pretty easy process once we get agreement to move forward. And in this example, for this organization, in their patient access, for you guys that aren't familiar, that's the people that check your pre-regs, for they're going to verify your insurance and those things I talked about earlier, but also the registration when you come in and you stand and they ask you your 5 million questions about all the things about you. That's that group. And the numbers in the black circles are the number of staff members that we monitored. HIM and coding and revenue integrity, this is where they put in all your charges. Your medical coding that gets the claim paid, make sure that's done correctly. We take a look at that. And then the back end, where all the fun work takes place with, I bill claims, there's a lot of corrective action that goes along with that. I do a lot of follow-up on claims because insurance companies, sorry if anybody works for an insurance company, they never pay the bill. Denied accounts, this is where we get very specific denial reasons. Well, let me rephrase that. We get very specific codes for denial reasons. We very rarely get very specific reasons for denials. And then payment variance, They only had a couple payment variance people. This is where I typically expect to get paid $100. I get paid 75, and I want to know where the $25 went. So that's the process that we used. It works very well for us. And again, the 10% number is really across a process, a major process like this. This is a relatively pretty good mix. We are deploying now, though. I think this was total of 50. Let me check my math. Total of 50. We're doing one now. We're actually looking at much greater numbers than that. It's a much larger organization. It means there's going to be a lot more clicks and stuff to look through, but that's typically the setup and process for that. So what comes out of that? So those 50 people, 37 machines, because there was some duplicative use of the logins, or not the logins, but the machines. That left us with 1.4 million interactions. I call them impressions. Automation Anywhere likes to call them events. Events to me is something that seems very concrete, mathematical, not a lot of ambiguity. The impressions to me are more of, what in the heck was that person doing? And so I like to talk about them as impressions instead of events, but those are all the interactions. These are the numbers per those job functions that I mentioned. So a good sampling across that 10 days. There's no way ever in my 32 years of doing this that I would have been able to get that much information sitting and talking to somebody about their job. So it's incredibly important for us, those volumes. It's incredibly important that the tool packages those together in like routes or like paths, because we're looking at a lot of stuff. Now the middle screen is more for an analyst kind of view. We don't use that graph. First and foremost, if any of you guys use a pie chart, we need to talk later because it's the worst visualization of data ever. But this tells us the applications they use. I really don't care. I care about the pathway and the process. I don't care that they had to hit Epic 500 times. I expect that because that's in their job description. So we get all this initially. This is a summary view. And then we really start digging into it and cleaning up. We got to clean up the data. We've got to create mining runs of the data. We've got to create some butterflies and visualizations of that data. And then we've got to start applying our subject matter expertise to make some darn sense out of it. That just sums up the 6 bullets on the left. But what we really do is, much like I mentioned, we look at the screen signatures. We'll try to make some, out of the macro runs, we'll try to find some common processes and then break those down. We'll put people together so we know based on their job function, back to this. So I know the one HB variance person, what their user ID is. We can track that. So we'll group people with the same, we'll group their user IDs in the same job function. Then we'll mine that so we can see everybody doing that similar job, where all the combinations come from on the pathway. That usually takes a little bit of work. It's not too much, but it's invaluable because I'll have a few people that are, on Tuesday I was doing follow-up. I wasn't really doing billing. Oh, great. So we kind of got to dig into that a little bit deeper. It's not quite as clean as we would like. And then we'll kick all that. Once we got those groupings or those cycles, then we'll kick off the mining runs. And that's where the system starts packaging up like activities, like screens, like users, and puts them into something that's useful and meaningful from a process discovery standpoint. We'll do a lot of review of those. We'll then break them into the opportunities by functional area. So you get some data like this, and this is actually from this client. You can see on this pathway, I think this one had a total 396, 204 followed the same path. High likelihood of potential automation there. It also took them, is that minutes? That's how much time the 204 paths took, or the same steps in that pathway took. And then we can start really breaking that down into meaningful, this is where I said maybe. See here that only went 19 times out of 396 may not be a good candidate for automation. So it gives you this stuff natively, makes Bob and I look a lot smarter than we really are, particularly me. He's actually brilliant. So we can start packaging all that up. Once the data is clean, then you can get some outputs that help you make some decisions. All right, so a real life example. So we had, on this account, 394 times over a 10-day period, by the follow-up team, which I think was 5, I can't remember, 7, where they would go out to a portal. This made me ill when we saw it. They would go out to a portal, they would look at an account in Epic, they would get that account information, they would then go to a portal and look up that information for that claim, get a status of it, which if you get a status, you should probably take whatever actions required to advance that status to adjudication, hopefully payment. They were not doing that. They would then come back into Epic, add a note, add an activity, close out the account, and defer it. They would manually defer it. What we mean by that is, I want this account to go away, nobody sees it for X days. Hopefully something happens to it, it doesn't come back to me and I don't have to work it anymore. Not that they were really working it to begin with. That happened 394 times for 7 people over 10 days. 85% of those followed the same 2 paths. And actually, once we started looking into it, those same 2 paths could be compressed. So I should have done it before I got here, but I think my quick math is what, that's 330? Somewhere in that range, 335? 335 times out of 394, we could automate that. We didn't use any RPA for this. We got extracts, ran it through their Experian clearinghouse, got a claim status back electronically. Not all of it was useful, but most of it was. We then repopulated the work queues with that information, and based on the priorities we could put on based on that status, they were then resorted inside the work queue. Or if it was things like going to pay in 14 days, we would defer it for 14 days. So people don't have to touch work that they didn't have to work. That's process optimization using FIQ or process discovery. We're able to find those type things. This is just one example of where we were able to optimize their Epic environment based on all the things we saw in the process discovery maps. So that was a very valuable one. Because again, this 394 across 7, I think total they have, remember how many, Bob, 50 or so, something like that. So you extrapolate that over a group of 50, you're saving a lot of time. So that's that efficiency, that throughput, the incremental value that I was talking about. That's one where it was actually worthwhile because those people could now do something more valuable with their day, hopefully chasing accounts for real money. Another one we came across is the eligibility status within Epic is wonderful, so they tell me. They got a tool, it's called real-time eligibility, where you can go out and check whether I'm eligible or not. However, as you can see, these are actual screen grabs. They would come back and say they're eligible, however, their ID number changed. That's gonna fail when I bill it. I'm not gonna get paid. There's some other things there where they gave us additional information, but we were not updating the system with that intel. What we were coming back and saying, yeah, they're eligible. So nobody ever worked it, nobody ever did anything. That failed to the point of $50 million over 12 months. Some would be verified. So that what we found through the screen grabs is that a high number were coming back as eligible, 54.8% to be exact. But of that 54.8%, a lot of them had alerts at the bottom that were not being updated in the system, and therefore we were having an issue where we'd have to rework. For those of you that don't know how this goes, I bill it to the wrong insurance. They come back and tell me I don't have that patient. I do the research, and you used to be Medicare traditional, now you're Medicare HMO. All right, I should have caught that at time of registration, but I didn't. Well, now we optimized RTE1, so we fixed the things in Epic that you could fix. But secondarily, not all of that works. RTE doesn't work with every payer. So those that are not fixed in RTE, predominantly those that are not Medicare from a chaining perspective, we launched, or we're launching conversational AI, where we will actually call a payer. If we can't find it on a portal, we'll call a payer with a bot, then we'll bring that information back, and we'll use the RPA to either update the system or take an action if required. And so we're leveraging 2 types of automation to help really drive down that $50 million of rework. Again, for those of you who don't know, a denial, there's a bunch of different studies. To work a denial like an eligibility, which is fairly simple to correct and resubmit, it's anywhere from $118 to $125, give or take, to fix that. Well, you do it over a bunch of claims, it's $50 million. You're paying a lot of money that you really don't have to because we should just never have it in the beginning. So this is an example of exponential gain because we're fixing the process on the front. We're leveraging the core tech that exists where we can, and then we're launching conversational AI, portal access, and RPA to significantly drive down that number. A couple additional opportunities that we've explored and actually built a roadmap for them. All of this generated off of the task mining. So everything that we've got here, we don't have to read through. I'm not going to read through this. It's available for you if you want it. But these are the other areas, if you recognize the job functions that we talked about. So these are some of the other opportunities. The two that I expressed, I wanted to talk through the incremental approach and the exponential approach and the differences in that from a task mining discovery. But these are all on the roadmap to implement, and it's been such a success. We're now doing task mining with supply chain, general HR functions, reimbursement department, and we'll eventually move into HR payroll as well. So it'll follow the same pathway. We'll do the task mining, we'll identify opportunities, and we'll deploy whatever process or tech optimization or enablement or automation that is most appropriate for that problem. What's it take to do that? And then this is my last slide, and you guys can ask me anything you want. You can stay as long as you want, or you can bolt for the door, go grab a beer. Or for those of you who got to get to the airport, good luck to you. What does it take for us to do that, given that we now use the tool? We can be done, and this is an elongated time frame. We could probably do all of that work in about 4 weeks, but we like to tell the client 8 weeks, just in case we run into hurdles. We're doing one now where the screen captures weren't working, so we lost a week there. So we like to build in a little bit of buffer, but everything goes well. We study for the 2 weeks, we analyze for 2 weeks, we present findings on the opportunities and the ROI for the business. And that is all I have. Thank you. Any questions?
Nope, we got a question here.
So like you said, the timeline is 2 weeks is what you take for capturing the process. What about the challenges and errors that take place rarely and that is outside of 2 weeks? And like maybe monthly or
bi-monthly. Most of our processes that we deal with are 2 weeks. It would really be, I think it might have to be something that if it's a process that you're more intimate with, maybe it's less, maybe it's more. There's some simple things that we can do. Like we think AP, that type stuff, could probably be just a couple days. We also think things like financial close might have to be 2 months run because we want to see the month-end process and then potentially the year-end process. So that, I wouldn't worry too much about that 2 weeks. You'll get a feel for, and if you don't have enough information, you can turn it back on and start running again. So.
Okay.
There's a question in the back. Oh.
I was going to ask if you saw any improvement in the time for turnaround. So since, like with discovery time, like is it faster to release automations now, and how much time did you save in that regard?
So we're just now, for this client, we're just now deploying that. Except for the stuff with Epic, we optimize that. I don't know, Bob, I don't have any of those metrics for that, but we have them. I don't have them in here. And I don't do any of the hard work. So you'd have to ask Bob on it.
Is there
Anything
a question
else?
in the back?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, how often do you see clients use this to measure incremental process improvement over time and or to ensure process governance once changes happen?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question because we're looking to provide that as a service, but you could individually if you had the licenses. That's a big component of what we're trying to present to the market is let's go in, we'll optimize, and then let's come in every 6 months or whatever the time frame feels right to say let's do it again. And it does two things. So it's process governance where you didn't deploy automation to kind of take that work out of the human error cycle that happens to all of us because we are human. Maybe hungover, who knows, whatever the day brings. But there's also, did the automation break? While we're measuring again, we shouldn't see, say, a worker doing some of these tasks because we thought we automated all of it. And well, maybe systems down or whatever, things that happen to us through the course of using technology. We want to see those things too, from an automation governance as well as just a process governance. But great question.
Hey, Mike. The total estimated projection for financial outcome for that particular use case, what was that number?
So across, again, this was just the one example. I don't know on the efficiency one because we're not concerned with that. What we track are either first pass denials predominantly because that helps with that, but also AR liquidation. So instead of just statusing, now we're doing things in an automated fashion. So we compress the AR curve. We're seeing a pretty dramatic reduction. What it's actually at right now, I don't know. It's in the millions from the efficiency gain, from the denials, not just around eligibility, but the other denial work we're doing on the front end. We're hoping to see about a $10 to $15 million reduction is what we're trending, or what we've modeled out.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
we're not quite there yet, but that's what we're shooting for.
From two dimensions, accuracy and time compression on the discovery, how much manual effort would it have taken to do that work without FIQ?
How much of that manual effort and error were we able to pull out?
Yeah.
Yeah, so depending on the process, we're looking anywhere from 20 to 70% along those lines. So there's a lot of things because of the coupling your all's tech with the voice tech that we're using. We're looking to take as much of that work out as we can. It's going to be significant numbers when we're done, and ask me next year because we'll be through it at that point.
Yeah, I'm curious when the digital consultant's running on a user's machine and they do something invisible, right? So they bring up a screen in whatever and they just look at it. They don't really do anything with it. They just look at it and then go over somewhere else. How does it deal with that?
It actually captures it. So it's, because you've got to click to open that. And so we're presented with that screen and then they have to click to go somewhere else. And it shows that
But
next
how
screen.
does it know that it captured like a date, that it's using, that person's using to make a decision?
So is the question, how does it capture it in the field or?
Yeah, like how does it know, okay, this user looked at this date and
They made some decision off of something on the screen that we don't have any interaction for. You won't.
Yeah, so we capture interactions through keyboard events, mouse clicks, several different kind of facets around that we get from the OS.
But that's why I was calling it impressions, because if we saw that 100 times,
Right.
we would then take a look at that screen and say, okay, here's the 10 items on that screen. Because we know the processes so well.
So it's where like the
What on earth would I use those 10 fields for?
Right.
And then follow the path after that and say, oh, well, they were using it to verify that they got the patient's phone number or something. So it does take, there's a little bit of, that's the art to part of this, that you've got to know, at least in my opinion, you've got to know the process fairly well if you really want to optimize it.
makes sense.
One more question in the back.
And again, on that, I'm a rev cycle guy. So when we do finance projects, I pull in our finance people. When we do HR, I'll pull in our HR people because I don't know it that well. So I can do the time studies and all that, but I really don't know the process well enough to say, hey, what's going on here?
Right.
That's correct. Yeah.
Hey, Mike. How are
Hey
you?
there.
Question: when you say 4 weeks, which you tell your customer 8, right? What's the staff makeup to get that done in those 4 weeks? And what is the skill set of that staff makeup?
So there's soft skills and there's tech skills. The staff makeup right now, even for very large ones, it's probably Bob, I, and 2 of our junior consultants. And they're really, really smart guys, me being the exception. That know the tool and can break it down and start building those things out and packaging up the findings. But it's not a team of 100. Particularly if, rev cycle is a pretty complicated process for us. So we can do that in 2 weeks. We can do a lot of other processes probably faster, but it's not a large team for us at least. But again, we've got a high comfort level with the tool. and we do understand the work very well. So it's quicker than maybe just a general analyst that doesn't know the work as well. Yeah, sure. Anybody else? Awesome.
Well, thank you guys very much. We appreciate you joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.